This is Cinematic Suffering, where we watch every horror movie streaming on Netflix, from A to Z, for better or worse. Life is pain, and so are bad horror movies. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinematic Suffering. This is episode 6, where we talk about the Netflix streaming horror movie Six Souls.
That's right.
I am Jason.
I'm Clay.
And Clay, what are we about? What is this stupid podcast about?
This stupid podcast is we are alphabetically running down the horror movies in Netflix streaming A through Z. And come what may, whether we want to see it or not, whether we've seen it or not, we're going to rewatch it and we're going to analyze it and review it.
Yeah, so 6 episodes in, and how do you think how are you holding up?
I'm enjoying it. I haven't, I've hated the movies a lot less than I thought I would, which has been kind of fun. This is, it's been a reason for me to get back into watching movies and horror movies in general. So I've been enjoying it. How about you?
Yeah, I have to agree. I thought I'd hate some of these movies. Of course, we're only 6 in. That's not a lot, but it has been 6 weeks continuous of watching these things.
Yeah, it's the first 5 minutes of a triathlon.
Okay, so the movie we watched today was Six Souls. Six Souls has, I think you have the information, actually.
Yeah, it was written by Michael Connoy. I'm going to mispronounce these names, so sorry if in advance. It's directed by Bjorn Stein and Mons Moreland. And the movie stars Julianne Moore, Jonathan Rhys Meyers, Jeffrey DeMunn, Francis Conroy, Brooklyn Praux, and Nate Corduroy.
Corduroy, yeah, that sounds right.
Nate Corduroy, yeah.
Yeah, so this was a movie that had some pretty big names, and I think some of our first big names, other than maybe 47 Meters Down, but I don't know if you want to consider Mandy Moore a
well, never diminish the star power of Matthew Modine. You drove that feature home. Now, this one does have, pretty good group of stalwart Hollywood, people that you've recognized. There's some actual actors in this feature.
Yes, and yet another Weinstein feature that came out in 2010, apparently.
Yeah, which, I guess we just have to kind of be comfortable with the fact that we're going to see his name everywhere on everything. His goo-encrusted fingers are all over Hollywood. And I think that he's kind of indicative of Hollywood more than the outlier. I think that he's just the sacrificial calf that the Babylon of Hollywood has decided to offer up as a sacrificial heifer.
Yeah, I think we might be off track here, but I just want to mention that there's a book called Hollywood Babylon that goes back to the 1920s, pretty much the birth of the film industry, and this shit was going on back then. It's always been going on. It's just kind of been really exposed now, and I'm glad it has been, because a lot of
I am too.
I mean, anyways, we're kind of off track, but that's okay. We need to get that off our chest, because every time I see Weinstein's name, I just get the creepy crawlies.
Yeah, I mean, we are much like a lot of other podcasters, I would assume, looking at this from the outside. So you can kind of examine the whole movie industry with a certain amount of admiration and derision. So that's kind of how I'm coming to it.
Okay, so Six Souls, we have a movie that at first when I started watching it and I saw the kind of rundown on the theatrical trailer, I thought it was going to be more of a kind of a psychological thriller in the vein of Identity, or what's another? Oh, like Primal Fear, if you remember that old movie from the 90s.
Yeah, like it's the trailers right off the bat kind of show you that it's the first thing that you learn about is that it's going to be a split personality kind of thing, and Julianne Moore plays the psychologist, which is pretty familiar territory for her, and so yeah, we're dealing with a split personality deal. So for whatever that comes with, that's the first thing you learn from watching the trailer.
Right, and as we start the movie, we see that Julianne Moore's character is Dr. Kara Harding, and she is kind of a skeptic psychologist or psychiatrist that doesn't believe in multiple personalities. She believes that it's not a mental health issue. It's just people kind of faking it. Yeah,
she right from the outset, she she draws a line in the sand, like, no, I'm a skeptic when it comes to split personalities. That doesn't exist. There's just people know what they're doing, and they don't do a real good job explaining what her stance on that is. You just know that she's a skeptic and she doesn't believe in it.
Yeah, and at the beginning we see like she's before, I'm assuming what is like an appeal committee before the governor of whatever state she's in, because there's someone on death row that I guess is put in a last minute appeal for his stay of execution, and she's kind of an expert there saying, no, he's not mentally deficient. He knows everything that he did. He killed whatever little girl, and he deserves to die, pretty much.
That was her stance. Now, her character, Julianne Moore's character's name, the psychologist, is it? I had it down as Jessup. So what did you have for her character's name? Because I don't want to be. It's going to be confusing enough with all the split personalities and the plot interweaving itself. I want to make sure I get her name right. I had it down as Dr. Jessup.
No, it was Harding, Dr. Kara.
Harding?
Yeah, Dr. Kara Harding. I'm okay. Looking at IMDb right now too.
So. Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah,
Dr. Kara Harding.
Yeah.
All right.
But you're right. Yeah, it's going to get a little confusing as we continue down the road here because the multiple names for the same character, pretty much.
Yes, the lead character, the lead bad guy. We'll get into it, but as Jason stated, it starts off with Julianne Moore's character talking to this very official-looking group of people about this dude that's about to get the juice put to him.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure in her capacity because after that, she goes to the bar, has a couple of shots. She sees on television that the murderer gets executed, and I'm not really sure what her capacity is as her. She has a daughter who's being watched by her brother, which is a continual thing throughout the movie. But her dad calls her, or I guess her dad is a psychiatrist as well, and has brought up a new mental case for her to look at. It's not clear on what he does or what she does per se. It just sounds like, oh, I've got a new case for you. And is this?
Took it to mean that Dad is also a psychologist. He might be he might have gone into a different branch, but you get the idea that Dad is some kind of clinical psychologist, and so is Dr. Harding. You said?
Yeah.
I don't know why I had Jessup down.
Yeah, I'm looking on IMDb. I don't see Jessup on anything.
I had it written down multiple times. I probably misheard it once, and then my notes were kind of fruit from a poisonous tree from then on out. But which I thought was an interesting name because religion just come into it. I was like, oh, Jessup, it's one letter away from Jesus. It's like, no, you just got your notes wrong.
And there is a correlation between having faith in this movie and having a belief in science solving all the world's problems. It harkens back to we even bring up 1920 here again, where it had that kind of religious versus science aspect to it.
It seems to be a running motif in a lot of horror movies. A couple points in this movie, I was rolling my eyes hard enough to need LASIK by the end of it, or some kind of surgery on the connective tissue on the old peepers.
Yeah, so this movie did have its flaws, but I will say the acting was excellent.
You can't. It's hard to find fault with any of the actors in there. The actors, the cinematography, the music. Visually and professionally, all the things that you would notice being wrong with a movie as far as technically were fine. Those were all done well in my estimation.
Yeah,
my humble estimation.
I totally agree with it. Yeah, it was well filmed, well acted. Julianne Moore is of course a veteran actor, and Jonathan Rhys Meyers is a very kind of established actor as well. He's I think he might be most famous for playing Henry VIII in the Tudors series that was on HBO.
Yes, he was fantastic in that. Everybody in this is good. And everyone, if you watch movies even a little bit, is going to be someone you recognize. They do fine with what they're given.
Yeah,
that's about the best I can say on that. But so where are we at in the plot here? So we got crotchety old man, fellow psychologist that tells Julianne Moore's character, "I want you to meet this guy," and he seems real excited about his daughter meeting this guy. And right off the bat, a couple things bug me. Like, no one seems to care all that much about Joseph Dunkirk. That's the character that they just injected poison into. We see Julianne Moore's character drinking in the bar, but she doesn't seem to be upset by his passing. I don't know that she should be. The guy's established to be a raping murderer, so good riddance. But it bugged me throughout the film whether she's a drunk or whether she was just having a drink. I guess she was just having a drink because they never come back to it aside from her brother making mention that, oh, I'm sure you're at the bar getting shit-faced or some kind of comment like that.
Yeah, I thought it was I thought it was going to be a running theme throughout the movie as well, but no, we don't visit her chugging down shots anymore. It's just kind of like a one-off scene where she just watches the news on Dunkirk's execution.
Yes, and very in short order, her dad wants her to meet the next.
Yeah, I always thought of her dad in this movie as being kind of provocateur, just like always challenging his daughter, and he does bring that up later. He's like, "I want you to challenge your beliefs." It's like, but you're playing with people's lives here,
and you're supposed to be a man of science, and and so he's all giddy with anticipation of her meeting the next guy that she will possibly see fried on the electric chair or turned into a corpse.
Yeah, because we don't establish that this is around the time we see the patient who's right now Jonathan Rhys Meyers' character's name is David. He's like a derelict they say they picked off the street, and Dad says there's something about him. He has a southern accent, but I know Rhys Meyers, I should say, is an English actor, so I could hear some of that English coming through with that southern accent, but that doesn't matter. But he's in a wheelchair, and they wheel him into this interrogation room. And during this scene, before the scene, you see Dr. Harding, Kara, sitting at the desk, and she's writing with her right hand. And then as she's talking to David, she's writing with her left hand. And now I don't know if this is a flaw with the film, but I thought, oh, this is some weird-ass kind of M. Night Shyamalan stuff that's going to happen later. It's going to bring that up or anything. Nope. It was just a scene where she was writing with her right hand and another where she was writing with her left.
That's really weird because it's another one of these hanging threads that they never did anything with. I almost wonder if they were going to do something with it and then it didn't happen, because that's not a mistake that you make. You don't accidentally write with your non-dominant hand. It's not something that happens unless you're directed to do that.
Yeah, I thought that was very weird. I mean, like I said, I was just expecting some kind of a cool twist, and I like Identity or, again, Primal Fear. I don't know why those stick out as the primary movies about split personalities. But anyways, moving on.
Well, we never see it again, so don't fixate on that one too much, folks.
Yeah. So she's in there, and she kind of asks these basic questions on if he was religious, how many windows he had in his house growing up, if he can see what he sees in some Rorschach tests, if he can make out numbers in these color palette tests to see if he had color blindness, and he kind of plays all these things fairly normal. And
other than being in a wheelchair and having a southern accent, those are the things that we're kind of pushed into focusing on as the audience. And then her father from behind the one-way glass calls into the room. He calls in there, and I think he says, "Can I talk to him on the phone?" Is that how it goes? And then he says to Adam, like, "Can I speak to David?"
No, he says to David, "Can I speak to Adam?"
Ah,
yeah. So Dad calls into there's conveniently a phone located in the interrogation room, which I thought was odd, but I guess that was all kind of set up by the dad anyways. And
tittering, this is going to be great. It's like the most evil
I'm gonna freak her the
joke you can play on anyone, much less your daughter.
She's gonna be so freaked out when she sees what happens.
This is gonna erode her core beliefs. I love it.
Yeah, and so Dad calls, and David answers. David / Jonathan Rhys Meyers answers the phone. Dad asks for Adam, and David kind of twitches and does these jerky sounds and violent.
Oh, he werewolves out. What we get is the first stage of any standard werewolf metamorphosis. You can hear bones cracking.
Yeah.
You can hear gristle popping and sinew snapping. I was thinking, Jesus Christ, is he going to turn into a lycanthrope here? I think his head turns at an odd angle for just a second, and then he goes through this great transformation into Adam. And Adam is a completely different personality, different character.
Adam has a kind of Bostonian accent, I should say more of a northeastern accent about him. He's got a different mannerism all around. And
got a general "the fuck you looking at" kind of accent.
right. And I kind of get you kind of get a kind of a menacing vibe about him, but at the same time, when Julianne Moore, or Dr. Harding, Kara Harding, I should say, interviews him, he's, he knows stuff about her that she didn't think anyone else probably knew, or something that Kara's husband had been murdered. And
his overall tone and his vibration is kind of menacing, like he's got an almost kind of rapey vibe about him or something. He's a very kind of dominant personality.
Right, and she does the same tests she did with the David personality, with the Adam personality, but this time she shows him a card and asks him if he can point out the number that's on the card, and he can't. So it turns out he's got color blindness. And
exactly, this character is colorblind, and I guess he's partially psychic, because he knows something that about Kara's dead ex-husband. He asked how he died, and she said he was murdered. So am I skipping ahead, or is this?
No, that's pretty much it. And I don't know if he was psychic, or if maybe the Adam personality had just read that in the paper. Who knows?
Yeah, she says something to make him mad, and he stands up abruptly. So we realize, okay, he's not. This one isn't paralyzed, and she's none too happy about it with Dad, as I recall.
Yeah, she gets mad at him for doing this to him, but it kind of just cuts from that scene to where we see her daughter at her brother's house, and
we meet Uncle Stephen, and Sammy is her daughter's name.
Okay,
I got the names right, I hope, on that one.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, yeah, Sam. Let's just call her Sammy, because I imagine it'll come up. I hate child actors. There's about 3 or 4 examples that I could think of. I tried real hard to think of 4 children actors that didn't make me mad, and I think Dakota Fanning came up, and the kid from The Sixth Sense. People that somehow caught up to me in age.
Yeah. No, you're right. I always have a tough time kind of believing child actors, and this is kind of another one where I was just like, okay. Especially later when there's another scene that comes up, and I'm like, this is a little too heavy, even for a kid that maybe 7 years old.
Yeah, in her defense, it's not her fault, because this would be a tough role for anybody. But as far as the actors go, she was the one kind of again, unfair on her. She was the one that stuck out as her performance didn't do much for me. But we meet Uncle Stephen and Sammy, Dr. Harding's daughter, and they're palling around at his house. Stephen is a musician, which kind of comes into play later on in the movie. We see a lot of musical equipment around his apartment.
Yeah. And Dad decides to give Kara Adam's file so she can review it more on his past and I guess where he came from. And then we kind of do a flash shot to the back of David or Adam in the wheelchair, and there's scary music, and then you see him kind of changing, doing those twitches and turns, and he's scratching the back of his neck, and then all of a sudden it just flashes to Kara Harding in her bed the next morning.
Yeah, he's got some kind of infectey spot on the back of his neck. That'll be a running theme throughout it. An inexplicable running theme in my mind. But so let me see. I think the next thing that we see is Dr. Harding is examining 2 sets of x-rays. Each one was taken. Oh, God, this part of the movie pissed me off. So we see 2 sets of x-rays, one from the Adam personality, one from the David. And in one of them, the spine is visibly damaged to where, okay, he's got... So what we're dealing with is that I guess his spine repairs itself when he phases back in between personalities. This part of the movie made me pretty mad.
Of course, Dr. Harding doesn't believe it. She thinks it's just 2 separate x-rays.
She's voicing the frustrations of the audience at that point. Yeah, she's like, somebody's fucking with me. There's no way that this is real. And her dad is just tittering with laughter again. He loves it, which Another thing that made me mad is he's a man of science, and the big conflict that he has with his daughter's character, Julianne Moore, is that he doesn't like her skepticism that people's spines can't heal themselves and fuse themselves back together when they change personalities.
He's like, how dare you use science to explain this? Don't you know this is a supernatural event?
Next thing you're going to tell me there's no big hairy ape men that hang out in the woods, and no monster in Loch Ness.
So she talks to, I guess, Adam's doctor / old psychiatrist, who's Dr. Charles. I didn't catch his last name. I just caught it as Charles. And
I think that his first name was Stephen, but yeah, let's just call him Stephen because he's a very kind of side character. He's David / Adam's previous psychologist.
Yeah, and he seems like an old friend of the family, and they talk a bit about Adam's personality and the problems he's had. And she says, okay, well, I'll see you later, and she takes off, and before she leaves, you see the doctor reach behind his back and start scratching at his neck, and you see like a scar on the back of his neck.
Yeah, and they take pains to show this thing to you. So you're dealing with, okay, this is some these back of the neck scars are going to be important because we have two people in a row that are have this. I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
I still don't know. I took extensive notes and watched the whole thing, and anyway, I don't know what the purpose is. Maybe we can figure it out together throughout the course of this, but
or not. Because at this point I was thinking, is the dad real? 'Cause I'm trying to look out for all these clues about if Dr. Kara Harding is in her own kind of split personality state. You know, maybe she's experiencing some things. I'm trying to notice if the daughter is even real, if the dad is real. And I'm just trying to, waiting for those twists and turns to come, and as is usual through these kind of psychological thriller movies. But no, this was pretty much just straight up just horror supernatural film, but we'll continue on here.
Well, at some point, Dr. Harding goes around this part in the movie. She goes and looks up some old yearbooks in wherever the archives for old yearbooks are kept, and she finds an old picture of David / Adams. One of his personalities is actually tied to a young man that was living that had died some time ago.
Yeah, David. She finds David Bernberg, or whatever his last name is, in a yearbook, and she sees that, of course, it's not this guy at all. It's a totally different person, and he graduated in like 1980 or whatever the yearbook said.
Yeah, so that gives us our next kind of jumping off point in the plot, and there's a lot of those. Yeah.
We flash to David experiencing visions in his dreams. Then he wakes up looking like evil as fuck. And did they show some kind of nebulous black form over David / Adam while he's sleeping? Has that happened yet? Or Not
is that
yet.
A little bit movie. Oh well, yeah. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, but it comes up in a video like just shortly.
So okay, we've met his previous psychologist who's coughing. Always a good sign in a horror movie. Horror movie in general. If you cough, if you have the intensity of the cough dictates how soon you're going to die. Like if it's like you might make it to the end of the movie, means that you're going to die within this scene.
I know. I'm so glad that doesn't apply to real life, where I would have been dead last podcast that we did for 47.
Oh, I would have been dead. Yeah, I cough every day. I mean, with sinus problems, I'm surprised I made it to middle age.
But yeah, the old psych doctor that she had visited now is coughing. She's on the phone with him. She's like, "Oh, get better," but it, hangs up the phone, and we see that the old doctor has sores all over his back, and he starts vomiting up soil, like dirt coming out of his mouth.
Yeah, like potting soil. He starts spewing up potting soil, and it's like, oh, that's not going to get better.
That's a weird diet he was on to try to cure some whatever he has.
I know what it is. It's diatomaceous earth. It's what people use because they think it's healthy. You're not supposed to eat the whole bag.
Well, I figured, you can give it to your pets and that kills fleas on them. So, why wouldn't it work for humans, right?
Right. It causes bowel obstructions, but no fleas on that guy. Scathing infections, but no fleas.
Dr. Harding now drives out to where David lived in the boonies of whatever state or province they're in. I'm not even sure where they are at the
I
moment.
don't know where this was. I was kind of wondering that as I was watching it. It's somewhere Midwestern-y, West Virginia-y, somewhere like that.
Yeah, I
It's
want to
kind
say it
of,
was in the Appalachian Mountains somewhere. But there's lots of creepy baby dolls tied to phone and power poles. There's snake handling weirdos. There's odd symbols drawn on some of the trailer doors as she's driving by.
yeah, going into this place, all it's missing is just a barbecue sign with finger bones writing out the letters. There's somebody, like you said, there's somebody milking a rattlesnake venom. There's baby doll heads. It just looks real foreboding. And Dr. Harding makes her way into this creepy ass property, just ovaries of steel on this woman, and goes in the back and sees an old lady tending to a grave.
Yeah, this old lady, I've seen her. She's been in so many shows now. She's in that, what is it, that Stephen King Castle Rock show. She's in.
She always plays. She seems to always play like the crazy / psychic character in any kind of Stephen King adapt. I don't know her name offhand. She's a fantastic actor. She was good in this, and she's been good in everything I've seen her in. Even when the movie she was in wasn't that good, I always recall her as being really good.
Right, her name's Frances Conroy.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's very good, and it's weird how I start noticing her in all these different kind of roles. She's also kind of a regular on American Horror Story as well. If you ever,
that's where I've seen her.
Yeah.
And that kind of sums up. You talk about something that sums up not worth the sum of its parts. Jesus Christ! I won't go off on that tangent.
So we have her visiting. Dr. Harding is visiting Frances Conroy's character, which is David's mother, and she is not Conroy. What am I thinking? Dr. Harding starts asking her about David, and David's like, Jesus Christ, why can't I get it right? I'm gonna edit all this shit out.
1,000 names in this thing, but
and, Harding talks to David's mother, and she asks where David is or how David is, and the mother says, "Oh, you're standing on him." She looks down. She's standing on the grave of David.
Yeah, you'd think she would have mentioned something before. It's like, it's been pissing me off the entire time you've been disrespecting my son before.
That's right. You've been standing on his grave the entire time.
By the way, if any of this is confusing, it's not you.
It's not you. And if I start sounding confusing, it's because I'm already very confused, and I'll probably edit some of this stuff out.
I was taking notes so furiously
Me
that
too.
I had to rewind and watch it again and try to get it all down. It's like, wait, you're acting too fast. I can't take it all in.
Oh man, yeah, I was taking so many notes. So we learned that David had an accident that causes paralysis, and then he starts kind of losing his faith because the area he's in is a very religious area. Like I said, snake handlers and the like. So he thought a doctor in the city would be able to repair his legs, and one of those doctors was the Dr. Stephen or Charles that they were talking to earlier that started coughing up the soil, and that's the doctor I'm assuming that David went to. But soon after David was murdered in the city.
He was murdered in the woods, near his home.
Oh, that's right. Murder in the woods near his home, and apparently by Satan-worshipping mountain witches.
Yes. There is so much to take in at this movie that I think we're barely into the getting towards the second act of the movie, and it's just bombarded you with plot and character. So just to catch us up, we got a split personality guy who's somehow basing his second personality on this paralyzed, murdered boy that was murdered by crazy mountain people that are into some weird pagan shit.
Yeah. That's simple enough, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Happens daily.
The running theme, of course, is that David's mom says, "Well, he turned his back on God and turned to science for the answer, and that's where he messed up." And
it's like, I think you need to ask Jesus for some decorating help, lady, because this place is scurry.
Harding continues her investigation, talks to her dad more about David and Adam's history. I think that's around the time that the dad starts berating her because the dad is playing basketball with a bunch of mentally ill folk that I'm assuming that are there, and he right in front of all these poor bastards, he starts berating his daughter on just relying on science for her belief system.
And it would have been great if the whole basketball team started crying and hitting themselves in the forehead. We just have some abject chaos, because anyone that's been around, intellectually disabled people knows that you don't just throw out a lot of emotion unexpectedly. It's pretty infectious for the room. That would have been fun.
That would have been that would have been an amazing comedic moment. So Harding continues her investigation. This is where Dad brings Adam back into the interrogation room, and
yes, and we get another Jekyll Hyde moment.
Right, Adam is now back to David mode.
Yes, and David is David's kind of the Hyde character, or Jekyll. Which one's bad?
The Hyde would be the bad character, yeah. But I would hesitate to even call the Adam personality a Hyde character, because it just seems like he's abrasive but not particularly harmful. But yes, so the mom shows up. David's mom shows up, and the personality of David tries to convince his mother that, it's really him, and she almost believes it, but then doesn't fall for it and says, the devil's trying to trick me, and she slaps
him across the face, which, as we know, any any good psychologist would do that in this situation. There's somebody that I've got that's obviously delusional and thinks he's somebody else. Let me bring that dead guy's poor mother into this interrogation room and have her talk to this guy. That's a great, what could go wrong with this little meeting?
I guess it's a great therapy. It's one of these new age ideas of confrontation therapy or something.
I can't even figure out what Dr. Harding's intention was in this moment. I've struggled with a lot of people's motivations in this movie, and especially in that moment. Like, what do you expect to get out of this? I guess she was trying to prove her theory that this is all bullshit. I don't know what she was trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the motivation was for this, unless she's just so desperate for the Adam/David personality just to reveal themselves as being a fraud. And that's where maybe she was trying to draw it out, but he kept saying all this stuff that was personal to the mother, and the mother was slowly getting drawn into it.
But he was telling her things that were intimate that no one else could possibly know, and she slaps him across the face. I can't tell if it's because she believes it or because she doesn't believe it, but she's not having it.
Oh no, she's not having it. She slaps across the face and immediately leaves. And then we flash to just a weird scene of Dr. Harding visiting a church. And
yes, it's another bit of her backstory that doesn't really help us much about her personality. She's a Catholic. She's a good quote unquote Catholic. I'm air quoting vigorously. So she's a Catholic, and she's kind of an alcoholic, which makes sense in Catholic.
So this is, oh my God. I just thought that was like a weird kind of throw off scene that didn't make any much sense, since it lasted maybe a couple of seconds. The next thing we're out in the car as Harding drives the David/Adam person. I'm just gonna call him Adam/David the entire time.
That's probably the best way, because we know that it's the guy.
The guy, yeah. And so far this isn't very much about six souls. It's just about two personalities primarily. And Harding takes David out to the woods, and he has a scary vision. So
terrible idea.
Yeah, no, this
is poorly advised.
Horrible. She wheels him out, first of all, in the wheelchair along a muddy bank into the woods, which is
into a very escapable scenario.
And she says, "What do you remember about this place?" or something about that. Yeah, I think it's the area where David was murdered. And he has this scary vision of a devil approaching him, and
he's coming.
He's coming. Yeah. And he snaps out of it, and she tries to move his wheelchair. Of course, it's stuck, and she gets on the phone. And while she's on the phone on her cell phone trying to call the orderly, we see in the background David starts wigging out and turning into a werewolf again.
Yeah, he bends his neck back in a way that would be like, oh wow, like you can hear bones and ligaments snapping again. I think that they needed some real obvious way for us, the audience, to know that he's changed. But it seems pretty obvious. But
it seems pretty obvious, and you think the doctors would notice the change, that he's bending his neck way too far back. This is not normal. I mean, we've seen people wig out and think they're possessed, but they've never actually turned their heads around on their bodies like this guy seems to be doing.
Yeah, that's the moment when you realize that exorcism is you might need one. You might need yourself an exorcist. Go.
Well, that's where I thought by the time this point was coming, where we're seeing all these different changes in his character, the Adam David personality character, I thought, okay, this guy needs an exorcism, and I thought that's where it was going.
Yeah,
and
she gets on the phone and calls Jai from 1920 London, and he shows up, and we're all delighted. Unfortunately,
that would have been such a great crossover.
Three of us would get it.
And so the orderly is on his way down to try to help the wheelchair out, but it turns out now we see a new personality show up, this guy named Wes. So it's now David, Adam, and Wes.
Yeah, Wes is the third guy, and this part you should like. He's the lead. The third personality is the lead singer, the dead lead singer of a satanic rock band, a scary Satan-y rock band.
Yeah, and I thought you see a couple of the cheesy CDs around where his graveyard or his tombstone is, and it's just like obviously these photo mock-ups of guys dressed up in black, and just it was really cheesy, but I was like, okay, I get it. He was the vocalist for a black death metal band.
Wes is the third personality, and predictably he's got a vibration that's really kind of are you date rapey kind of Wes? There's a very kind of I'm looking at you like a wolf looks like at a raw piece of meat kind of vibe about him.
Right, and Wes has this menacing vibe about him. Virgil, the orderly, shows up, and that's the last we ever see of this Wes personality.
Yeah, we don't have time for Wes. We're on point 3. You know how I felt? I felt like the same way as watching Infinity War. Like, okay, we're on the third stone. We got 3 left. So
I was counting on my fingers, too, the entire time. It was like, of course, I did have a calculator available, but I was like, this is 6 souls. I've got fingers. I can keep up.
You got all 10 fingers, so yeah, you can count. It's all going to work out.
So Harding goes back to David's mom's house, and I guess David hummed some kind of tune that was familiar, not really familiar, but she had never heard it before, and she asks, "Oh, where did you learn that tune?" And David says, "Oh, I wrote it." So Dr. Harding goes back to David's mom's house in the boonies and asks her about the song he hummed. David's mom says, "Oh yeah, he wrote it. He's a musician too, or whatever." So we see Harding kind of trying to develop this theory about Adam's multiple personalities, and she thinks like Adam had witnessed David's murder when he was really young, and so she's already kind of developing this psychological profile. She's still not believing that it's a supernatural event, that these are just
yeah, and at this point I'm thinking, are you getting paid for this? Like, because income has to be a consideration here. She is jumping through hurdles and just hanging on stringently to the scientific method. Like, there is no way any of this is real. She's just bothering these people to kind of disprove that that there's something otherworldly, whatever you want to call it, going on.
And you bring up a good point. It's like, what is she doing? Is she a contractor for the hospital? Is she a doctor for a hospital? Does she work with her dad at the same place, or are they colleagues? It's not really established why she is doing this in the first. It just seems like a challenge from her dad saying, "Here, try to figure this shit out."
I know. What I think it is somehow she just gets paid to get dudes fried on the electric chair or on the,
But at this point though, we don't even know that this character, this personality, has committed any crimes. It's just that he has multiple personalities apparently. So he hasn't really committed any crimes. He's obviously free to walk about. He's shown up at her car window. He's been out he's shows up in a soccer field and all this stuff. So he's not confined anywhere.
No, and he's got one lazy orderly that just kind of sort of keeps an eye on him. So it's you're confounded to why she's even messing with this guy. Obviously, income is a consideration. She's a single mom, so I don't know.
But let's keep moving on.
Somehow she gets the next plot lily pad that she needs to jump to is to visit Adam's old house. She gets it into her head. I'm going to go to Adam's old house. I'm going to find just solid evidence that he witnessed the real Adam's murder. at his house. I think that's her motivation to go to this old house.
Right. Yeah.
And the house is just disgustipated. It's just crawling with maggots and mold and rot, and it's in the scariest neighborhood you could imagine.
Yeah, and there's graffiti. There's religious graffiti on the walls. There is a dog there for some reason, and she walks up and she's just inspecting the place, and she's walking around, and she goes upstairs and starts smelling something horrible. She goes into the bathroom, and there's something covered in the bathtub, and she lifts the cover, and it turns out to be a dead body that's decomposing in the bathtub.
Yeah, good and rotted. Yeah, so she calls the cops, and the cops show up, and she's like, "I need to go. My daughter is at softball practice or something."
Yeah, it's like softball practice or soccer practice or something. So she meets this kind detective. He's just kind of an ancillary character that doesn't really do anything. But she says, "Oh yeah, I got to go," and he's like, "Oh, you don't have to be here." So she takes off, and she arrives at the soccer field or softball field and sees the Adam David personality guy talking to her daughter.
And she rightfully flips out. Yeah, what are you doing here? Like, she probably 1,000 questions are running through her mind at that moment. The first and most important too is like, how are you out here? Why are you bothering my daughter? And probably third is, did you kill that body that's in your house rotting?
Yeah.
three very reasonable questions at this point.
Right, and we discover that the Adam/David/Wes personality says, well, you invited me here. That's why I'm here to see her play. And she was doing such a good job. She's going to be a star or some shit like that. And Dr. Harding is, of course, what do you mean I invited you here? And he's like, oh, yesterday when you came to the hospital, you said come out and watch the game. And you can call me Cece, or he calls her.
Thought he said Steve. Oh yeah.
He calls her Cece. It's some kind of a term of endearment. So it turns out to be the doctor.
Doctor, his Adam/David's former psychologist that we established before, that earlier in the movie puked up potting soil and had the big, scary, gross infected rash on his back.
Yes.
That is now the fourth personality. I think.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct. We are now at Adam/David/Wes/Charles. I'm going to say Charles because in the IMDb it says Dr. Charles. So
well, that makes sense because Stephen is her brother.
Right,
Too many Stevens. So,
too many
Stevens. Charles it is.
So we have 4 personalities now, and Harding talks with her daughter. Oh, there's like the scene afterwards that we go where the daughter's sitting in a bathtub, and Dr. Harding is bathing her daughter, and she's like, it's some existential conversation about believing in God and how the daughter doesn't believe in God anymore because daddy's dead. And I was like, wow.
My nose started to bleed at this point. So I had to not even okay, that can't be important because I can't, my hand is cramping from notes and I can't take it all in. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because I couldn't at that point.
This is one of the points where my eyes were rolling around in my head and just making knocking noises all over my skull.
What is going on? There's too much plot. But
and then we see that Harding is drying her daughter off, and Steve says she has a weird itchy rash on her back now. Yeah, not on Dr. Harding's back, on her daughter's back, I should say. I'm trying to differentiate, but
the daughter is the one taking the bath. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm kidding. So
so she calls her dad, and Dad tells her that Dr. Charles is dead, and all of a sudden we start hearing Dad start coughing on the phone.
Yeah, and Dad's back is awash in infection. I'm guessing he can't see it because if you've got that much pus coming out of your body, you would know. I mean, he's like end of cabin fever level of infection on his back. So we know Dad's not going to make it because he's coughing. He's got the racking, dirt in your lungs cough.
Yeah, so we've kind of established coughing is pure death in here. It's like the tuberculosis, but with instead of blood, it's soil coming up.
Yeah, definitely running with a theme here.
So we flashed a video of Adam in jail, and that's where we start seeing his weird visions, and then we see the dark shadow hovering over Adam, and then just disappears. And it doesn't really establish. I don't think anyone's watching the video at the moment, but because
It's almost like they felt like they had to get it in there, otherwise the continuity would be shattered. But at this point, I don't know that it matters. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
yeah, we see, okay, well, it is some kind of spiritual devil entity that's, fucking around with this dude. So we see that the nice detective interrogates Adam / David / Wes / Dr. Charles. Turns out that Adam's house had the carving, had that same symbol that was carved into his back, the corpse's back.
It's like a stylized cross, like a poorly drawn cross.
Right, and it resembles symbols found in David's mom's house. So Harding
Dr. Harding says, I recognize that symbol. So she's back to bother the mom for the third time.
For the third time, and Mom tells Harding to go look for Granny.
Yeah, ask for Granny.
Ask for Granny.
You could have told me this earlier, but go ask for Granny. You.
Oh God, yeah. I'm just thinking. It's like if we would just all talk to each other and were free with information earlier on, this 9/11 of a film would never have fucking happened. This is like the FBI and CIA pre 9/11. Just
what I've learned about horror movies is that being a skeptic and using common sense and the scientific method in general sucks. You just got to go straight to the fucking witch doctor. go to the leeches. Go to the exorcist.
So Harding drives up into the mountains of the mountain folk, and she shows one of them this cross symbol, and then Granny, this twisted woman, blind woman, comes out of nowhere and wants to see the symbol, and there's this creepy child,
light eyes, and she's got a kid with white hair that kind of sees for her.
Yeah, and the kid sees the symbol, and then Granny, who's standing like 15 feet back, says, "Oh, I know what this is. You need to come with me." So what exactly happened? So I didn't know if Granny wanted her to come with her, but Harding wants to know what it means, but Granny says Harding would never believe her, and that's kind of where the scene almost ends, because Harding just says, okay, fuck it, I'm going to get back in my car and just take off. And I'm like,
drive right back to town. And it's got to be at least an hour drive. Well, I think they established that it's an hour drive, about 15 minutes, he said, which, they tell us facts that we don't really need all that much, because at this point, it's like, you want me to keep track of distance? I'm going to call bullshit on that. That's going to be the sticking point for me. But yeah, Dr. Harding says, how did you do that? Because the kid who sees for the Granny, I don't know, they do a parlor trick, and then she says, how can you do that? And the woman says, you wouldn't believe me what it means. And then she's like, all right, peace, and goes back to town, goes back to Uncle Stephen and her daughter Sammy.
Yeah, she goes back into town, and she starts calling. I think she calls her brother to let her know that there's some freaky shit going on, and her brother says, you see her daughter kind of jamming on these electronic drums. She's got earphones on, but we see the brother Stephen looking at this video of the shadowy creature. I'm not sure how he has a copy of it.
I don't know. I guess his sister just gives him all of her evidence that she's been collecting.
Doctor patient confidentiality be damned.
Fuck that. Yeah, it's like, I'm not even his doctor, haha. But in another part of the movie that we're just supposed to accept, which was just a mountain of bullshit in my mind. Uncle Stephen is just watching this video of Adam / Wes / et cetera, sleeping with this black nebula shape above him. And then he looks at the waveforms that his niece is making, playing drums horribly. She sucks on the drums. And then he's like, Eureka, I got it. That's a sound wave. That's a waveform over the bed. Let me just run it through my software. Clickety, clickety, clickety. Oh, it's a voice. I'm like, wait the fucking second. How did you get here?
I'm right there on track with you, because I'm saying, what kind of fucking software are you using? We're looking at some unrealistic, weird.
It's so stupid that this black form that was just kind of hanging out over our schizophrenic character is something that you can feed through Pro Tools.
Yeah, that's what it was. It's like you can get your free Audacity program and just plop it in there, and suddenly it's saying some obscure bullshit that you can't even make out.
Yeah, but I made a mistake before. So Dr. Harding was not actually traveling back. We cut back to her still hanging out with the witch doctor rednecks, which this woman has just titanium ovaries, because like I couldn't have waited to get out of that situation. Like there's scary rednecks and they're into voodoo. So well, let me stick around, see what unfolds.
Right. And she when she leaves, she doesn't exactly go back into town. She just kind of goes to this abandoned gas station, and that's where she gets messages from the detective that says they couldn't hold Adam / David / Wes in any kind of holding, so they put him into the care of her dad. And
yeah,
then,
we've given the psycho over to your dad, who's we've already established has serious, problems with boundaries. He's already kind of violated your home, and now we're going to let him in your home. Yeah.
Right, and then that she gets the message from her brother about the voice and plays some of the creepy, unintelligible shit to her through the voicemail.
Yeah, it's like et cetera, faithless, et cetera, et cetera. I can't remember. You couldn't hear what's said, but he's figured it out. He's cracked it.
But then this is another part of the movie where I don't understand where this name came from. Maybe I missed it when I was taking notes, but they mentioned a Christian Moore.
They pulled it right out of their ass.
They did.
It was the same with me. There's all of a sudden there's a new goal that you have to. There's less running around in like Fallout or one of those games where the whole game is you're just following breadcrumbs back. Go to point A. Now bring me back that thing I told you to get.
Yeah,
it's that. All over the place.
And even if it was something where it was like a point A to point B, bringing me this back, it still develops a story that kind of makes sense in the gist of everything. But they just bring this name up, this Christian Moore, and they say, oh, the brother, I guess, discovered the name and says, oh, there's some dude named Monty who has more info on this Christian Moore in the same area where she's at.
And she's like, I could be there in 50 minutes. And he's like, well, go. And it's like, why?
It's like, oh, brother, where art thou? It's like, well, this is a geographic anomaly. It's like, well, 50 minutes from everywhere.
I love that this internet innovation led the brother to this expert, but there's no more information. It's like he hoards it. You have to go. He's a very lonely old man, and you have to go have tea with him. And he might try to put his fingers in you, but you'll get the information.
And this old man she goes to see, this Monty, is... Well, hold on. Before that, we see like another flashback of Harding's daughter now coughing, and she's scratching her neck and back, and we see that she comes away with some nasty slime. So we know that the daughter, Sammy, is getting worse. But then we flash to Harding visiting this old man named Monty. He's got to be in his maybe early mid-80s, and he shows her some old footage from 1918 about the influenza epidemic that happened in the mountains where thousands were dying. And this Christian Moore, who's a reverend, arrived to kind of preach to the mountain folk and said that he had a cure and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's just, and by this point in the movie, I felt like the movie was straddling my chest and punching me in the mouth with plot. Like, take some more of this. So we learn about this faithless doctor. He loses his faith. It turns out that his kids were the only kids in the village that didn't succumb to the influenza outbreak because he was secretly using evil medicine instead of faith to heal his kids.
Right. He had secretly inoculated his children, so of course they weren't affected at all by the influenza that was happening at the time. And then we learned that this Monty that's showing her this old footage of 1918, he was probably around 10 years old in the footage, and I'm thinking it's 2018 now. And if this footage was 1918, so that's exactly 100 years. Well, hold on. I could have said it was 2010, so it was almost 100 years. It's definitely in the 90s. He would definitely be in the 90s. No, he'd be 100 something.
Yeah,
I'm trying to do the math, but
that math will bring you nothing but pain.
Yeah, he should have been much older. Even though the gentleman was an elderly gentleman, Monty, but he should have been much more elderly than what.
God, liver oil do wonders for you. I guess he took it daily. Yeah, and just a pristine memory for a child in the midst of an influenza outbreak. He remembered all this stuff, like these granular details that I guess we need for the backstory. I don't think that it was all that necessary, but it was kind of interesting, but I don't know if necessary.
Yeah, this last part of the movie, the last third, I'll say even the last half of the movie just lost me because I was very intrigued intrigued at the beginning, and then it just started going quickly downhill. But yeah, this Monty says he remembers sneaking into the tent of the Reverend and found that his children had been murdered by the townsfolk or the mountain folk. And we see footage of the mountain people dragging the Reverend, and we see an old granny, not the same granny, I don't think, from that we see in the modern version, but maybe an older one, and she sucks the soul out of the Reverend and then spits him out into the air and then shoves soil into his mouth so the soul can't get back into his body. And then we go back to modern times.
Yeah, so they oh god, it's exhausting, isn't it? Like they've established how the dirt in the mouth but still not the pussy cross on the back. I don't know that's been kind of fed to us yet.
Well, yeah, they actually did. I forgot to mention during that flashback kind of grainy footage, we see the mountain folk carving that symbol into his back before she sucks out the soul and then jams the dirt in his mouth. So yeah, I guess it's a symbol that the mountain folk have been using for their religion. And
so I guess in this moment, what the granny did is that she basically released a vengeful spirit out into the world, and that's what we're dealing with. Is an angry spirit.
Yeah, so she didn't want this spirit. She didn't want to. They were going to murder him, but they didn't want him to be at rest, so they just released the spirit, and he's been this angry spirit. So Harding decides to call her Dad, but Dad's all fucked up. He's coughing, and we learn that it's not Adam. It was really Adam that she found in that old house that she discovered the body in the bathtub, and she tells her dad that wasn't Adam. Isn't Adam? It's this guy is taking on the personality of Adam because Adam is actually dead, and the dad is like, okay.
Let me just cough up about a pound of potting soil here, and then Adam / David / Wes shows up and does mouth to mouth with Dad after spreading his mandible apart like an anaconda.
Yeah, opens his mouth and starts stealing the soul of the father. And this is where, at this point in the movie, we see in the old footage that she's being shown from Monty that the Reverend turns around and faces the camera, and the big reveal is that
it looks exactly like him, which the guy that we know is Adam David West. Which makes no fucking sense.
It doesn't.
Why does it? Why would he look? Why would he?
I know, and makes no goddamn sense at all. I'm sitting here wondering, thinking maybe it's just a spirit infecting a body, or are all these souls? Are they the real people speaking through, or is this just?
I don't know. Are they unwilling kind of victims in this? Are the spirits kind of being coerced? It makes no fucking sense.
It doesn't make any goddamn sense. And this is where it just started losing me near the end. And but yeah, we're closing in. We're closing in on the end.
Yeah,
slowly but surely.
They're rushing. They're pushing you through. It's like, and then Dr. Harding calls the orderly at the hospital. It's like, you got to check on my dad. So the orderly that we saw is established as being very poor at his orderly duties goes upstairs and finds Dr. Harding's dad dead on the ground. And he's got this, I don't know why they chose this. It looks like he's got semen coming out of his eyes. I'm not trying to be gross. That's what it looked like.
Yes, it's weird, kind of like an Evil Dead kind of pus dripping from his eye holes and everything. But it was a brief but cool effect. But
but he's good and dead.
He's good and dead.
One less character to worry about, so you can be good. You can be glad about that.
So Stephen, the brother, Uncle Stephen, and is babysitting Sammy, of course, and then Harding calls him up. Dr. Harding, she calls him up. She goes, "Oh, you got to get out here right now." And as they're starting to leave, I'm going to call him the Reverend now because that's how he's been revealed.
That's kind of who he is. Adam / David / Wes is now just the Reverend. That's who he's always been, I guess.
Yeah, and so
he shows up. He shows up to terrorize Uncle Stephen and Sammy.
We should also bring up that Dr. Stephen was going to take Sammy to the doctor because she's coughing up a lung and she's got these weird sores on her back, and Dr. Harding, she's like, no, don't take him to the hospital, bring him up here into the mountains, and they're both
bring him to the witch doctor. Yeah. I've changed my mind about it. my life's work. We need a witch doctor. A doctor won't be able to help this girl.
Exactly. And so the Reverend shows up at the brother's apartment building, and it's supposedly the father now speaking through the Reverend and begging to be let in. And
Yeah, and Stephen's like, "You don't know, you go," and then the Reverend just pushes Stephen into the shower. They're holed up. Stephen and Sammy are in the bathroom, which it drives me nuts in horror movies. When you're trying to escape from somebody, so you go deeper into the house, into the most inaccessible part. It's just, please kill us here. We're in this corner if you need to get us. And Stephen gets shoved into the shower, and glass falls all over him, and he gets injured, and Sammy is scared.
Sammy is scared. Yeah. Yeah, Sammy is scared. She's on the phone with her mother, and as we see, like, the Reverend slash dad now is telling Sammy, "Oh, come with me. I can protect you." And we see Sammy hold up the phone, and Dr. Harding says, "I want to speak to David." And since David is paralyzed, the David's soul, I guess, comes out and gets paralyzed and falls to the floor.
Cracks his head.
Cracks his head and is unconscious on the floor. Uncle Stephen wakes up, and they conveniently wakes up. He's bloody. He's bleeding from various parts of his body. He's got shards of glass in his gut, and
well, we don't even know that yet.
That's true. Yeah.
It's like he's got so much glass in him, which, if you're going to have a glass shower, maybe better safety glass. I mean, there's just jags of glass hanging out of homeboy here. So he stumbles out, bleeding out of the neck, and he and Sammy get in the car, and he's convinced at this point. He's like, "Tell me where this witch doctor is." So he goes into the woods. It's Jesus. That's so stupid. And then he's driving. He's driving with Sammy to go to the witch doctor to try to get witch doctored back to health.
Yeah, and creepy witch doctor girl appears in the middle of the road. They stop really quick, and we see that Stephen he's obviously very injured and almost passing out. So Harding gets out with Sammy, and they start running through the woods towards the witch doctor area, and we see headlights
leaving the brother to bleed to death.
Leaving the brother starting to bleed to death, but we see headlights pull up behind the brother, and it turns out, of course, to be the Reverend has shown up. So the brother gets out with a tire iron in his hand, and we think they're going to fight.
He's dripping in blood. It's funny. And then he looks, I love this part where he looks down and he sees, I just now noticed I've got about 4 inches of glass hanging out of my gut. Like, okay, it would have been, maybe you would have dealt with that in the beginning, but.
I know. And then we get a chase scene. Well, no. Harding goes to the granny, goes to the witch doctor.
Yes.
And the witch doctor says, there's nothing I can do for her.
No, this girl's dead.
Yeah, like, what? She lost her faith. She's not a Christian anymore, Sue. She's gonna die.
I think she just read the God Delusion, so she's screwed 6 ways to Sunday. You need to get her out of here. She's done. She's done, son.
So they take the witch's advice and they say, "Okay, well, I guess we're gonna leave now." And of course, the Reverend shows up and just walks right past the witch doctor and chases them out the door. And we get the old trope. We get the Friday the 13th chase here, where Dr. Harding and Sammy are running, and she's holding Sammy in her arms, and she's running as fast as she can, and we just see the Reverend walking.
Strolling.
Yeah.
Strolling. Yes. Killers love to give their victims a head start, so it's a little bit more sporting to catch up with them.
And we see her running through the woods. She discovers Stephen's body on the ground next to the car. I'm just going to assume he bled out. And they
kind of like spilled milk, and then they keep running. Yeah. Very little time is spent on us mourning Stephen, who wasn't a good character, but he seemed like a good guy. So let's pour out some of our drink for Stephen at this point.
I poured out a little LaCroix for him as we passed by him briefly into the next scene. And so the chase continues through the woods. Dr. Harding falls down this embankment with Sammy in her arms, and they fall into this clearing that has kind of it looks like a ritual area, has some stacked stones in the middle, and I thought this was going to play some kind of role. Nope.
No, it's just a good spot to have your showdown at the end. The Reverend takes Dr. Harding and bashes her head against a tree, and then goes over to Sammy and sucks her soul out. And you're like, oh shit. And so he's got Sammy's soul in him. And then Dr. Harding wakes up with blood coming out of her nose, even though she got hit on her head. But at this point, it's kind of,
Well, I think at this point we're all, as the audience, all of our noses are bleeding, and stuff is coming out of our ears and migraines.
Yeah, splitting headaches, double vision. But she knows Dr. Harding seems to know what she's dealing with, and oh, it's okay, honey, come on over here. So the Reverend, who's now has Sammy's soul in her.
Yeah, just Dr. Harding consoles the Reverend / Sammy now, and
it's okay, baby. Just look at the rabbits. Look at
the rabbit. Yeah, it is almost a scene like that where she's like, just think of the rabbits, and she starts fucking choking them out with a sleeper hold.
Just choking him. Just got him in a full Nelson. And of course, he switches personalities so that he can have the strength of the killer, and they do battle a little bit more. And she's able to shove him on the ground, and a convenient. What would you call it? Just a stick.
I want to say it's a stick, yeah, because it was just a stick, yeah, sticking out of the ground. I mean,
yeah, like it stabs him through the neck, through the neck, and he's coughing up potting soil.
Yeah, he's coughing up his potting soil, and which I guess is his lifeblood.
Guess that's what he's made out of. I don't know.
Well, because again, it's like, okay, his soul was released into the air, but yet his physical body was still alive with soil in it. It didn't make any sense. So
none of it makes any fucking sense. I don't know that. I don't know. It's got me unable to say words for a second.
And so we assume that the Reverend is now dead. I put it dead in quotes, and Harding approaches the corpse of her daughter, and she comforts the daughter, and then I'm like, okay, you've turned your back on the dead monster killer, and I'm thinking, okay, this is where he's going to either come back to life, something's going to happen, and you see like this wind stir, and all of a sudden you see the daughter's hands kind of twitch like they have life in them, and her eyes start blinking.
He exhales a soul out, and Sammy comes back to life. And Dr. Harding is all, oh, Sammy. And she's comforting her now alive again daughter. And the daughter starts to hum the song that David wrote.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. And then we see her face go kind of slack, the doctor's face go kind of numb. And then the last shot that we see is the daughter looking real cold and murdery, with a real blank look on her eyes and some potting soil around her mouth. And then the movie just thankfully, shows us some charity and lets us off the hook, and then it ends. What a fucking mess.
Yeah, this movie, Sick Souls started off promising for me. I thought it was going to be kind of a psychological horror thriller, and by this whole time, that for that first third of the movie, I was expecting some cool twists and turns, some psychological twists and turns, and it turned out nothing was surprising. Red herrings all over the goddamn place, and the ending just fell apart like, I don't know, just like pouring Swiss cheese out of a bag into your sink. That's not even a good analogy. I'm not even know what I'm thinking of. I'm just thinking of.
I liked it because I could imagine it, so it was fine. Don't be too hard on yourself. Your analogy was better than the fucking movie in some ways. It's that's the thing. It's like it had everything that it needed, which you see a lot. That's what's frustrating about movies that kind of fall apart for you. Is everybody in this movie was really good, with the exception of the daughter, and I don't blame her for that. This would have been a challenging role for anybody. But that's the thing that bugged me the most about it. It was obvious that the filmmakers, that plot was more important than character, and to me, that's always a mistake. That's always going to be a mistake in my estimation.
Yeah, and this was a huge failing. I mean, this is probably I think, to me, I know you hated 47 Meters Down, but I think this is the least favorite movie we've watched, in my opinion.
I think so, too. I agree with that. Like, 47 Meters Down, like, as much as it seemed like I hated it, I loved to hate it. I was having fun hating it. And it never, you were never kind of going, what the fuck is going on? Even in movies that were just confounding, that should have been frustrating, like 1920 and especially 1920 London, those were fun. They were throwing way too much stuff at you, but it was fun.
Right.
This was nothing. I guess it's debatable whether horror movies are supposed to be fun, but there was just nothing engaging about this. Like it's an unfair comparison, but you compare it to recent movies like Hereditary, which was awesome.
Right.
And, it worked because it was character driven. There was a lot of cool history and subtext and symbolism, but it was character driven. You cared about these people. And when something bad happened to them, it felt like something bad was happening to you. This movie, who were these people? There was no one here. There was no one. They were barely characters.
No, I agree 100%. This is there were barely characters. And I can't disparage the actors because they were doing a great job with what they had. I'm just surprised that no one gave any notes about why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. But maybe I mean, we haven't seen Julianne Moore in anything kind of big in recent years, and we haven't seen really Jonathan Rhys Meyers in anything big in the last couple. So maybe this was just a paycheck for them, and they didn't care about.
I would assume that they cared, though, because, like you said, their performances were as good as you could hope for, with nothing to grab onto, just literally right. Nothing. I mean, what it kind of reminded me of? I didn't do any research on this part, but I wonder if it was based off of a novel, because it seems like the kind of story that, if it was a dense, thick novel, that it would have been fun to dig into all that stuff, and there would have been more breathing room to kind of give the characters a little bit more weight and a little bit more of a soul. But
yeah, you have a good point there. I'm just trying to, maybe there's some trivia that we're missing here. But
well, check it out. That'll be some fun, notes for the social media for afterwards, for the conversations that I'm sure we'll be engaging in with the populace.
All right. Well, that was the 6th episode of Cinematic Suffering, and that was the movie Six Souls. How convenient, actually.
That's right. 6-6.
6-6. Oh, if only the next movie had a 6 in it. What is our next movie?
It's called 6 minus 5 equals 2. And get this. It's an Indian Blair Witch ripoff. So,
yes.
It's like after a hard day, you want the warm bath of Bollywood. This isn't quite Bollywood. It's the language is different than the previous Bollywood movies that we've seen. And judging from the trailer, it was done with about 6 minus 5 equals 2/3 of the budget.
Oh God. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing this then.
Maybe. I am too, and I think it's gonna. It'll be a mess, but it'll be a fun mess. Is kind of where I'm going into it with that expectation.
That's what I'm hoping for, is a fun mess to kind of cleanse the palate of Six Souls here. All right, and until next time, everyone, thank you for joining us on another episode of Cinematic Suffering. I am Jason.
I'm Clay.
And we'll talk to you later.
Peace.
Hey guys, just a few plugs and shout-outs before we end this episode. Clay is an extremely talented and twisted comic artist, and you should visit his pride and joy, hboys.com. That's HBOYZ.com. If you're a fan of death and black metal, check out Jason's band Gravehill on all social media platforms, as well as his doom metal project, Stygian Crown. Music was provided by Face X Hugger. Check out Face X Hugger on Bandcamp and Twitter for more synthwave, horror-themed music. Questions, comments, and hate mail should be directed to our Twitter account @CinematicSuffer. Thanks for listening.